This is courtesy of Scott Valentine that we have that today we're hosting this talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, I think that this is the time and we can start. This is our first research webinar this semester, and everyone is welcome. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Professor Seck Tan. Professor Seck Tan is an associate professor at the Singapore Institute of Technology, where he leads the aviation management program. He holds a PhD in public policy from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore, a Master of Commerce in Information Systems and Management from the University of New South Wales, and a Bachelor of Commerce in Economics and Finance from the University of Sydney. His research centers on environmental economics, with a particular emphasis on the valuation of environmental goods and services. As an applied economist, he works across a broad spectrum of sustainability-related issues, contributing to policy analysis and recommendations for sustainable development. Professor Tan has been featured in mainstream media for his insights on sustainable development policies, environmental challenges, and climate change. He is the author of Rethinking Sustainable Development, Economic Integration and Public Policy. Before returning to Singapore, he taught at the University of Sydney and held roles in the aviation industry in Australia and New Zealand. We have the following format. So Professor Seck Tan will talk around 30-40 minutes, followed by the Q&A session. Professor Tan, the floor is yours. And the talk that he will present is titled From Theory to Action, Environmental Macroeconomics and its Implications for Sustainable Development Policy. Professor Tan, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor, sorry, Paula.
Dina, it's okay.
Dina, yeah, you called me Professor, that's why I had to do the same.
Sure.
But yeah, so everyone else, please call me Seck. My name is Seck, and I am very thankful for this opportunity. Appreciate this time of everyone on the Friday afternoon on your end. I'm going to disappoint most of you because I will not be speaking for 30 to 40 minutes. I'll probably be speaking about 20-ish minutes because I only have about close to 20 slides. And in the middle of anything, please feel free to interrupt. But I'm hoping that once I finish the sharing, we'll be able to have a good discussion subsequently. So could I just check that everyone is able to see my screen and it's decent?
Yes, I can see. We can see
Okay.
the slides.
Yep. Just testing on this. Okay, so I'll start. Again, thank you, everyone. Special thanks to the Graduate School of Public Policy, Nazarbayev University, Professor Scott Valentine, Professor Dina Sharipova. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to have a chat about what you're seeing on your screen at this moment in time. I'll start with an introduction, specifically talking about what growth versus development is, what is sustainable development. For some of us who are already in this field, this would be a repetitive kind of broken record, I like to call it, but it doesn't hurt to remind ourselves what it is. And then subsequently, I'll go right into what the environment is all about and what I am doing in terms of the scope of my work, specifically the next 4 points. And then start to question about what is business as usual, what is the status quo versus what could possibly have been. And last but not least, we'll wrap things up in terms of what climate change is all about. I don't think I need to tell all of us what it is, but I'm going to put it in the context of what the realm of my research is going to be circumparamagnetic. Right. Look at these diagrams. Dina mentioned that you are in the thick of -40 at this moment in time. I don't wish to tell you what I'm experiencing here in Singapore on this sunny island. Well, it's not sunny now, it's a bit overcast for the last couple of days. And I was sharing with Dina and Amina that we're having a really cool time of the year as opposed to what we usually expect. It's very cool, it's overcast, and sometimes raining in this part of the year. Leading up to spring, typically we get very warm weather and dry, but this year is a bit different. So that's Singapore. Other parts of the world, end of the year, I'm hearing from my colleagues in Europe, in Germany specifically, it's snowing. terribly, cold, wet, gloomy. Other parts of the world, I guess we will not forget what volcanic activities can do to us. They can take our homes away. At the same time, we've got the tsunamis. Let's not forget what happened in the 2004 tsunami in Asia. I'll bring it closer to Asia. If you look at this right top column, the right top picture that you're seeing, you've got 3 little pillars there. For those of us who've been to Singapore, you know that this is that fancy Marina Bay Sands building that houses a casino, a couple of incentive rooms, meeting and conference venues. So this picture was taken back in about middle of 2010. And this was the case where we had the haze coming from our neighbors. The haze is this little diagram here on the bottom left that tells us comes across as the Trans-Mountain haze from Indonesia or Malaysia, where they take away the land through the slash and burn to free the land and have peaty land, which is very good for whiskey, pardon me. But what they do is this is a fast way of taking away the crops for something else that they've deemed more useful. Then there's floods. In this picture here on the top left quadrant, that's a flood that was observed in Singapore, which is very unusual. In certain part of the time in the year that we see the water level that goes up to where the car bonnet is. So it's not all gloom and doom. We can do something. But before we do that, let's look at what growth is and what development is. So as what Dina had highlighted earlier, I'm an economist, specifically a macroeconomist. So a lot of work that I do is on the macroeconomics side of things. And when we look at macroeconomics, we clearly look at what is the GDP of an economy, the gross domestic product, national income particularly. We look at the employment level of a economy. And then we look at the inflation, which is price levels of an economy as well. So what contributes to all of that? You have to develop, you have to grow. So depending on growth and development, so growth is extracting resources from the ground up to improve better economic performances. Development is not about taking out resources. It is about enhancing livability. So about quality of life, employment, safety, and community development. So economy would need resources to grow. Traditionally, the factors of production that we look at in terms of growth is hands and legs, labor, like yourself and myself. And we operate machineries. So this is your capital, hardware. And we typically do not take into consideration the environment. But we do take things from the land. We need water, we need the soil. But all of this, unfortunately, in the traditional theories, they don't actually consider. So why should we consider the environment? On this last point, I'll pick this up again in the following 2 slides. But before I get to that one, I thought I'll sort of put this across to say, look, what is sustainable? Right? It is development that is sustainable because development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future. This is a very common, popular and well-cited definition by a bunch of esteemed scholars. And for development to be sustainable, the ecosystem must be maintained and protected. But the natural endowments that we have, that we see, unfortunately, they are not infinite. There is a lifespan to them. They are finite. And once we dig them up from the ground, we cannot put them back into the ground, fortunately. Or once we adopt them for a use, they cannot be used for another purpose. So this is that argument that we put across that often people say sustainable growth, but based on this, it is development that is sustainable because when you grow, you take things out, you cannot put them back in, and how is that sustainable? So that is not sustainable. It is development that is sustainable. And how do we match and fit all of that nexus across the social, the economic, and the environment? So I've taken this diagram. Some of us may have seen different mutations of this diagram where you have different portions or sections that the social and economic and environment are placed differently. But ultimately, what is important and what I want to highlight in this diagram is that overlap across the three circles, the three dimensions of social, environment, and economic, where sustainability is right smack in the middle. In other words, sustainability is all about harmonizing the three different identities that we have there: social, economic, and environment. Economy is a subset. So because economy utilizes the resources to grow from the environment, it is argued that it is a subset. So it sits within the wider environment. And it must be accounted because ultimately it is sitting within that subset of the ecosystem, the environment. I don't know the authors of this book, but I thought this book was quite an interesting read back in 2009. 2009 was a long time back when I was in my PhD journey. Looking back at those years, those were fun, but really tough years, but it's bringing me back very pleasant memories at this point in time. Because I was reading this book and I was expecting my first child, my daughter, and it's a little rubber ducky, and I bought plenty of that for her to play in the shower when she was little. So this book sort of brought on many memories, but of significance was that when I was writing the thesis, I was also reading this book. And what this book put across was that it uses the human body as an analogy to the environmental sink. So as you take things out and you put things back in, you take things out, you put things back in, you can't. Because what you're doing is you're actually polluting and you are basically increasing the level of toxins that you have in there. And as it aggregates, it's going to accumulate and it's going to pose long-term health risk. I'm not going to offend anyone in terms of your consumption behavior, but if you have too much alcohol or if you have too much fast food over an extended time period, I guess the body will tell you signals to not too much of those habits. So this is that book. Which I thought was a very good analogy of what I was trying to put across at a point in time. And when we look at the environment, I like to suggest and to look at this slide to say, look, the air, the land, and the water, these are public goods. Public goods, I cannot stop all of you from having that next breath of air that you take. I can't pay you to say, I can't pay you $50 to say, look, stop breathing for a minute, because there's no way I can do that. And even if I pay you $50 more to stop breathing for a minute, that doesn't mean that I have an additional 1 more minute of breathing air that I can enjoy for myself. So that public good pretty much is free for all. Everyone is entitled, okay? And when we look at what Samuelson and others had proposed back in 2010, is that the land gives us the food and the wine from fertile soils, and the water gives us the fish, the recreation, as well as transportation means. Then there is the precious atmospheric air that we breathe, the example I gave earlier, put it simply. It gives us beautiful sunsets. So that sunset, this diagram here was something that I took in Guangzhou back in 2012. According to the locals, they think that it is very rare to see that lovely sun on this bottom picture that you see here on the bottom right. They say that it's very rare on a certain day to see that full sun that's going down, and so I figured it's got a good omen for me. I took a snap of it and I put it back in this slide, and it's been a very good illustration away from everything that you're going to see next, because what I'm going to tell you next is all the theoretical algebra, the graphs, and a whole bunch of tables. I hope I won't put you to sleep on those. So I'm not trying to sell my book, because after all, this is academia. If I'm out for making money, and then I think I'm in the wrong trade. I like to think that way. I am open for you to disagree with me, but for now, it's a book that I wrote, and it was published back in 2024, specifically in June. And we titled it Rethinking Sustainable Development, Integrating Economic and Public Policy. So on the left-hand column that I have highlighted here is to how do we bring in environment as a capital into the traditional macroeconomic framework? So why is that important? It is important because we want to take into consideration the trinexus of social, economic, environment so that we get sustainable development. How do we do that? Well, what are the policy options that we can look at? What can we do to improve what we are already doing? Ultimately, we need to understand that it is not what you do, what I do, or what they do, or what he do, but it is about trying to deconflict what growth is, what preservation is, so that we can get into policy improvements. So this was the graph I was highlighting to you about 2 slides ago, and you're missing out that fancy diagram now, that lovely sunset in Guangzhou. So we're seeing we're seeing in front of you the horrendous graphs and the algebra. So I wouldn't bother you too much. I want to highlight a few things in terms of what this slide is trying to put across. So in this research that I had done, I looked at a couple of OECD economies.
Seck, sorry.
For the sake of illustration, sorry.
Hey, Seck, I think your screen has frozen up on you because it's still on the environment, public good, air, land, and water slide.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me see. Let me stop sharing.
As you know, it may just be me. This is you know, I'm usually the one that's causing this kind of trouble. So.
No, actually, it usually happens to me. So let me try this again. Let me put it back up and see if we start sharing this. Okay.
Actually,
let me put up the
see
full
the next
screen.
slide.
Okay, that's all right. Let's try it again. Not a problem.
Yes, the next slide.
Is this okay now, everyone?
I see the environment, public good, air, land. Now it's rethinking sustainable development, economic integration, public policy.
Okay, so this is my book. So you're saying that
Yes,
slide.
yes.
So it's correct. Let's try it again. This one are the graphs, horrendous ones. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The environment, valuing the environment as a capital.
Okay, good, great. Thanks for that. Thanks everyone. Thank you everyone. Okay, so where was I? All right, I won't go too much into details of the graph, but what I thought I had highlighted is that I'm using Australia as an example. So in the book that I did a bunch of economies, about 8 of the OECD economies. I had purposefully chosen 2 different economies from leading parts of the world, 2 in North America, 2 in Asia, 2 in Europe, 2 in the Pacific. So I'm using Australia as an example in this case. I won't bore you in terms of the algebra, but in terms of the graph that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, the one thing I thought I'll highlight is that I had delineated a traditional factor of production where you only consider machineries and labor. And then I added environmental capital, which is the 3rd factor here, into capital as well as labor. So this is the difference across the 2 graphs. And the point of argument is that if you consider the environment as a capital, you will have to compromise on the income GDP level that an economy will perform in its timeline that we look at. So that's the 2 differences that we have in this diagram. Then on the right-hand side diagram that you see here, this is a time series of Australia's cost of pollution abatement, which is environmental depreciation, but it is proxied through the cost of pollution abatement. So what it's saying is that, look, over time, it's on a trend of upward rising, clearly. As economies grow, you need to extract from the resources, and the resources provide growth. And over a 30-year time period, what we observe for Australia is that this has increased quite exponentially. The 2 arrows that are highlighted are times that have happened in the global financial crisis, as well as the flood that has happened in Northern Australia. Of course, all of us are aware, all of us survived the 2020 pandemic. So there was an increase in terms of the pollution abatement. And I'll probably link this back to the next slide, if you allow me very subsequently, is that there is an increase in awareness of protecting the economy, protecting the environment. So there is an increase in the cost of minimizing the pollution. So that's why there is an increase. So I'll talk about what happens where the impact is subsequently, where it helps with the economy. So before I get to the next slide, which is how it links from the earlier graph, if you allow me on a Friday afternoon on your end, is to give you this slide where it says, how do I break down the fact that, look, I want to see what level of capacity an economy has if it has already used up its maximum number of labor, workers, yourself and myself, pairs of hands and legs, if it has already used up its level of machineries, which is the hardware. And if I'm going to introduce the environment as a capital in this, how would this change that equilibrium? So I argue and I put across the point about steady state equilibrium and put it across in terms of a ratio where I look at the differences between the two-factor and the three-factor model. Three-factor clearly includes the environment. The two-factor does not include the environment, it includes the traditional form of labor and machinery. In the state of the economy, if we look at scenario A, if it goes beyond a steady state economy, then we need to seek policies to come back within the steady state. So this is the case where an economy could potentially have overheat. Scenario B, you are within the steady state, but there is room to build up capital. So which means you're operating with some capacity in an economy. You haven't overheated yet, you are about to, but you're okay. Then scenario C is at steady state. That means this is a happy state. Everyone wants to get here. You tend not to want to go away, overheat, or to have spare capacity. There is no ideal scenario because we're looking at a time series here. I don't have a snapshot to explain. In the book, I do have a diagram. I do have a chapter purely on the snapshot kind of arrangement, but I'm not going to try and introduce it here. I want to look at it across a time period, a time series. So if you remember this slide here, over here, Australia, this is the cost of pollution abatement. And over here, this is looking at how it has taken into consideration the environment as a capital, as well as the fact that it has also taken the capacity that it is entitled to. So the 2 points I thought I'll highlight in this graph is that this hard solid line is the economic performance of Australia when it does not take into consideration the environment, which is traditional way of measuring it. You take into consideration only labor and physical capital, machineries to drive an economy. Whereas the dotted line that you see on the bottom is that it includes environment as a capital. And if we look at all of this ratio of less than 1, I'll go back to the earlier slide. If it's less than 1, economy is actually overheating. You need to seek policies to be within the steady state. Less than 1. Less than 1 here, less than 1 here. So Australian economy has been overheating over the last 3 decades. Some would argue otherwise, but based on the evidence, based on the proxy that has been presented, it's overheating. It's pretty much closing at capacity. And if we look at the years of pushing towards COVID and past COVID, that's the time where you start to build up its capacity. There it goes beyond 1. Sorry, it goes beyond 1, which is this point here, scenario B, where it's building up capital. So that's the 2 points I thought I'll highlight in this graph. What is its impact? What is its impact? Its impact on policy implications, perhaps? It will obviously change the point of equilibrium where we look at when and where we want to adopt environmental taxes, how much time we want to provide climate subsidies, and do we maybe perhaps, because of the nature of the good, being a public good, think about engaging the public in the drive of certain policies. Back to these diagrams again. Is it real? Is extreme weather real? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe we're just used to it. We expect it and we know how to manage it. Is it in a crisis? Yeah, it comes and goes. But often we joke, because I'm writing a second book on island states. And for island states, I guess most of us would love to go to the islands, whether it's the Pacific, to enjoy our lovely sun, sand, and the sea. But when the sea level rises, it's a bit too late, is it? So, well, then what exactly is it? What is climate change? You know, we talk about what I have been harping about for the last 10-ish minutes. Right, to us, it's pretty much degradation of the environment, the loss of natural biodiversity, and potentially there could be implications on the economic performances of selected economies. That's us, we understand this, but to the public, what do they know? It's, yeah, what they say, global warming, extreme weather, and the list goes on. So what do we want to be? Because that's going to have huge implications in terms of how we want to drive policies. Are we going to be leaders? I like to do things bottom up. Are we going to be leaders? Are we just going to be skeptics? We're denying, we don't think this is real, it's just not going to happen, not within our lifetime. Are we going to try and believe this? Try and believe that, look, the environment hasn't got a voice, but clearly it is not well. So can we do things to make it feel a little bit better, perhaps? That's my last slide, I think. Yes, it is my last slide. That's what I have. I don't have the clock in front of me, but I'll stop sharing in a bit. So before I stop speaking, again, I'd like to thank the Graduate School of Public Policy, Nazarbayev University, Professor Dina Sharapova, and everyone who was here this afternoon for listening. Happy to take questions or any disagreements that you have with what I've just said. Thank you.
Professor Tan, thank you so much for your excellent presentation and a very insightful talk. Now I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Please, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to ask questions to Professor. You can ask directly or maybe to leave question in the chat.
Yeah, anything, it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
indeed,
Vladimir.
indeed.
Please.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just want to do this question. Because many of these models are based on the COVID and just post-COVID data when there was a certain, let's say, shock growth of the pollution after the COVID. Yeah, because it was very interesting. So there were very interesting results. So in the very beginning, there was no pollution, and then there was, the growing effect of it. But looks like that, that it could look like fluctuations. What do you think? Is it proper to use the COVID data right now, or better, I don't know, to wait, or just, I don't know, to take it off the raw of the information? Or maybe, I don't know, to make a moving average, or how to deal with this, because they are definitely shocks. Because COVID, this is something that happens once per century. But the models we are making, they're very generalizable.
Yeah, thanks, Vladimir, for that question or the comment. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I guess there is a chapter in this book that I compared two time periods, which means, and I didn't show it in the slides, unfortunately. I had compared the global financial crisis, which was 2008, 2009, so that we consider as a shock, and there was a section in the book that I defined it as a shock. And then subsequently it was COVID, so that's 2020, so that's a good decade after, right? And I did a comparison between not just the two of these exogenous shocks, but I also looked at the .com as well as the earlier SARS, which was happening only in Asia, as well as the 2004 tsunami. So I looked at all of this across that spectrum and I compared. So clearly we understand that it's a shock, but the extent of the damage clearly was more exacerbated during COVID because it was extended period and the data that we had obviously was quite limited, as you had rightfully highlighted. So I looked at the proxy and I looked at what it was telling us so that it's consistent. And we found that, well, it is not just that it is more impactful, it is also extended period. But what is not surprising is that the recovery was way more ferocious than all the other exogenous shocks. So I hope I've sort of put your question into perspective. I'm not sure if I've answered completely because clearly some of the evidence and the data that I could get myself on, I could not. So I wouldn't be able to give a complete answer to your query.
Thank you for your response. There is one comment and one question from our students in the chat. So
Okay.
Akmaral Eric says that it's interesting that the idea of including the environment in economic models had been discussed for such a long time as by Schumacher back in 70s. And the question is from Dastan Kusmanov, how could we measure KN to include into the model?
Yep. Maybe I'll take the first point. Thanks, Dina. I'll take the first point about Schumpeter back in the 70s.
Sure.
So if we look historically, that momentum stopped subsequently because it was thanks to two scholars, just one solo, that they had taken away the environment to make convenience for certain projects and research. And subsequently, all models that came on after that, the Herald, the DOMA, they simply ignore environment conveniently. So the studies on the environment did not come back again in the 90s when, of course, Daly was the one who was famous at bringing this back from the 90s and then subsequently to what we are now. So I think, again, just a little bit like the exogenous shocks that we are witnessing in the economy, is it just goes in the volatility and in fluctuations in different cycles. So I hope I've sort of addressed that in from my own opinion. How do we measure environmental capital to be included in the model? There is a paper that I wrote, and this was back in 2016, and it's also a chapter in this book where this is in the same vein of in the same vein of response that I had did to Vladimir earlier to say, look, the proxy of environment as a capital, if you're going to try and measure it, and the studies that I tried to do, it was painful. It was painful because there were a variety of proxies, public goods, but there were just so many ways to measure the different proxies. Soil, water, and air. There's just too many ways. And what is unsettling is that there is no agreed way to do it. So what I did, and of course I'm open to debate and discussion, is that what I did was I used pretty much what was available in terms of data, as well as what's available in the scholar, in the literature, which is carbon dioxide emissions. So carbon dioxide emissions, which includes all other greenhouse gases, 7 to 8 of them. And thankfully, there were scholars that actually put a cost to carbon dioxide emission per ton in US dollars. So I could use that, put it across to empirical means, and offer some form of time series to that. So that's how I used in my approach to measure environment as a capital.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So if I have a question. So
Yes.
you provided an example related to the developed countries, right? How can we apply your model, for instance, for developing countries, those who have maybe weaker institutions or, weaker economies? I mean, to what extent the policymakers can be incentivized to include the environment to evaluate the performance of the economy if it makes them look not so successful? I mean, because it's usually they stay in power for short term, and then if they don't look so nice and the economy is not good, what would be the policy implications? How can we incentivize realistically policymakers to include the environment into this equation?
Yep. Thanks, Dina, for that. I've got 3 points to make to that.
Sure.
Number one, I think for political holders, those in office, they clearly are not sure how long they're going to be there for. And if it's a short term, if it's a long term, obviously I'm not a political scientist. So what I'm going to suggest is that, look, we assume that they're going to be in office, and what they can do during their reign is to at least be educated about what the environment is, what it can do, and what it contributes towards economic development. So that's point number one. Point number two is I had tried to navigate myself around the data using of some of the developing nations in terms of what we could try to model their economic development and progresses. But often I find evidence and information incomplete. So it's not a fair judgment or conclusion to try and make of those economies. So if I fail in trying to understand the political side of things, if I fail to try and convince on the evidence and the data side of things, then I think I'll put it down to the concept of the environment as a good, as a public good, that every one of us own a piece of it. If every one of us own a piece of it, we are responsible for its well-being. And if you're responsible for its well-being, then there's no difference between a policymaker, a political holder, or the public, or the society at large. So if that's the case, then everyone has a responsibility. And if we're going to drive any form of policy implications or development or entrepreneurship, whichever way you like to call it, then we should get the public involved. We should get everyone involved. We should engage the society, and then before we decide on any of those development that we wish to. So that's my 3 points.
Okay, thank you. So what can we do with these free riders then? I mean, if it's a public good, there are free riders.
We could bring out the stick. We could take the incentive, right? So the stick, which I like to call it the whip, right? We take out the stick, we tell people that, look, this is not the best form of behavior. We don't agree with your behavior. Stop doing all of that, all right? So what we can do typically, I think the easiest way is to tax, but we also know that tax is the death of politics. So we've got to be very careful how we do this. Now,
absolutely.
And then who do we tax? Do we tax the consumers? Do we tax the producers? Or do we tax at point of consumption? Do we tax at point of emission? There's going to be a lot of debate in terms of how we do all of this. So obviously there is this other thing that we try to do in terms of cap and trade, which we focus on the firms and the industries. But before the full implementation of that, there are some grandfathering involved. And when there's grandfathering involved, then there's incentivized for people to try to misbehave. It's a bit like, you are allowed to buy that permit to pollute. That's a bit wrong, I feel. But that's a mechanism. Then alternatively, you can also subsidize and give encouragement for people to behave in the right way as well on the flip side of the argument. Yep. I hope that sort of helped to explain a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much. And we also have questions from our colleague, Professor Lisa Lim. Lisa, if you would just maybe speak up and ask your questions. Hello?
I think she said that the mic is not working. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. I can
Yeah,
read. I can read.
Oh, okay, I see. Sure.
Let me read. Don't worry about this,
Of course,
Tina.
sure.
Let me have a read at this. So,
oh, no problem.
just very quickly, environmental capital, integrated. Right? Okay, you agree on that. So the questions in the context of Kazakhstan. What specific bridge policies? Oh, that's a fancy term, bridge policies. Does the book suggest for countries like Kazakhstan, heavily resource extraction, manage the economic shock of transitioning to a green accounting framework? All right, I'll look at the first point before I go on to the next one, Lisa, if you allow. So, if I were to assume that Kazakhstan being a resource-rich economy, I know it's different, but it is no different to other resource-rich economies, which I have studied, which is Canada, which is one of the economies that I studied, Australia, and that's why I use Australia. It's a commodity-driven economy. And with those economies, what we find is that it clearly is multi-speed in terms of resource economy, the non-resource economy. So as a policy maker, I think the conflict that one is faced with is how do we converge the speed of the two economies? It is not going to happen in a short time period. It will take a while. If we look at the illustration of what Australia went through, it had a huge mining boom from the 2000 onwards for a good 2 decades. So if we were to look at how things may go for Kazakhstan, easily, for any form of infrastructure that we think about, massive infrastructure, you need resources. So that resource is potentially going to be in there for at least a good decade and a half. But within this decade and a half, it's very hard to convince people that you should stop doing what you're doing. Because what it ultimately is doing is driving growth, creating jobs, and giving economy and the individuals better living standard. If we're going to try and transit to the green accounting framework, I think for one point, we need to start thinking about how do we take into account the green accounting framework, which was what the Norwegians have done, in fact. They've done it very well. They are the first country in this world, and in the chapter in my book, I highlighted that illustration in terms of green accounting. You obviously would take into consideration how you net the resource, but are you able to continue this over an extended time period? I think that is what we want to see, because if we are only looking at snapshot, then we would struggle, because when we extract resource, we are not going to see a return from the resource, at least after a good 2 decades, minimally. So if we want to try and perhaps not extract so much, I think we want to try and tell the policymakers to say, hey, look, perhaps we want to instill some form of responsibility, for instance. The example I gave earlier about cap and trade. I think this goes down into your second question, Lisa, is that if we break it down into the firm side of things, so the firms are allowed to pollute because they pay. I'm not so sure I agree with that, but at least you look at not degrading what is already there. You cannot, unfortunately, address what has already been accumulated in terms of the degradation. In terms of the households, in terms of individuals, I think what we can do is do the education, do the cognizant test, tell people that, look, environment is precious. Do your best. Sometimes it may inconvenience many of our daily habits, but ultimately it's going to come down to our attitudes, our habits, and our perceptions of what it is all about. So I really do not have a straightforward answer to you, Lisa, because clearly I need to know the context better before I can tell better. But based on what we've seen across different economies of a certain genre, whether it's developing, resource-rich, commodity-driven, I think these are some of the common streams that we are seeing.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tan. We also have one comment and then question from Professor Valentine. So the comment from our student, I think it's a problem of changing the classical economic models to involve environment as a different input variable, evaluating the efficiency of production along with environment. Incentive to try and do so seems as a question of GDP growth versus actual development debate. Maybe you can comment on this comment.
Yeah, I'll comment on it for sure. I've been getting very similar questions, but in a more nasty way. So this is a very nice way of asking the same question. Well, I guess if we had a resolution about this, then I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't be here trying to convince everyone, look, let's try and do something about the environment. Let's try and monetize the environment. Let's try and see what the impacts the economic performances of different economies are across developed economy, resource-rich, commodity-driven. So this will keep going. This is going to keep going, and I hope it will keep going, because then at least I have a job.
Okay. Important
All right,
point,
Professor
of
Scott
course.
Valentine.
Yes.
Well, thanks very much, Seck. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you very much for a thought-provoking presentation today. I'll build a little bit off of Admiral's comment, which I believe it is a good comment and maybe deserves a little bit of fleshing out. To me, the whole sustainable development discourse is sort of very similar to standing in front of a buffet, an all-you-can-eat buffet, and saying, let's move to a steady state by giving people smaller plates. Like we're still so far past the the realm of sustainability that for us to get back, I think as Admiral was alluding to, we need to somehow reframe that discussion away from, the sustainability is your floor, and therefore we can't go underneath that floor. So we're, from a limit-based discussion to a regenerative-based discussion where we start to look at, for example, rather than using the current approach to GDP assessment, we start to talk about ills versus goods. So that prison that we're including in with our GDP calculations maybe shouldn't be, but on the other hand, that wonderful university SIT should be included, in the societal goods, because that's something that actually provides, regeneration to the economy, and that kind of I guess taps a little bit into the inclusive wealth index work that I don't know if you know Managi Shunsuke. You would have met him if you would have stopped refusing my invitations for you to come and visit me in Japan. But so I guess, sorry, this is a very long-winded way of asking you. Do you see any approaches to reassessing our approach to measuring wealth? And is there anything that has promise that will not incur the wrath of the corporate world to the extent that, it wouldn't even be applicable?
Thanks. Thanks for that question, Professor Valentine. So the first one points to how would we rather measure wealth, if I could paraphrase that. And then the second one is how do we then convince the ones who are the wealthy ones to stop behaving the way they have been doing over the last observed time period. That's interesting because, again, it goes down to perceptions. What do we deem as healthy? I wouldn't say wealthy now, right? Let's just take it away for a side and then let's look at what is healthy. So I mentioned in the slides earlier in terms of that rubber duck, too much junk food, too much alcohol. Yeah, we know that's not going to make us healthy, right? But in terms of then what do? Do we go whole turkey altogether? I guess we can't, because and at least in my culture, in what I believe, I eat. I live to eat. I don't eat to live. So I enjoy my food. So I'm going to be very upset when your buffet plates are smaller for me. I'm Asian, yes, I'm smaller, yes, but I'm not going to accept that my plate is smaller because I live to eat. So that's the perception that I have. Now, in terms of wealth, if we look at economy, so and then I'll go to the question in terms of how we sort of look at the individuals. So the exogenous shocks that we had highlighted earlier. If we look at something that is a little bit more extreme, if we look at the nuclear disaster in Japan, you mentioned about Japan earlier, and I rejected your invitation. So nuclear disaster was a huge, which was devastating, right? It took away people's homes, not to mention people's health in the long run. But in the traditional way of measuring an economy's wealth is that the government spends money to fix and to clean up, and then that contributes to employment, that contributes to income, and then that brings up the national income. Everyone's happy. Political holders, they have to stay in office for another term, for instance. This is increase in national income, increase in employment, but it doesn't take into account the loss of lives, people who's been displaced, people's health that would not surface maybe probably much later in their lifespan. So I guess this is that example that, I don't really have a solution in terms of how we try to, whether we should or we should not. So the reason why I had, proposed this sustainable development across the trinexes in that little overlapping area is to put that one message across to say, it is not just on the environment, it is not just on the economy, it is not just on the society, it is on all three of us that requires this to happen. So this leads to the second point that you had asked in terms of then what do we do? So that third circle in terms of the society, which is individuals, yourself, myself, everyone here on this webinar, all of us double hat many times in our lives. We are a consumer, we are a producer. So when we consume, perhaps we can be a little bit more conscious in terms of what our individual habits and behaviors would do to the impact of the environment. We're not trying to say we are a saint to save the world, but at least be cognizant because we have gone through the education, we have gone through that awareness program to say, look, yeah, sure, be wealthy, that's not a problem, but at the expense of perhaps the degradation of the environment. I hope that helps in terms of trying to looking at how things are. That's a comment. That's a comment. Sorry, before you agree or disagree with me, Scott. That's a comment by Macroeconomics in terms of degrowth of the economy. So yeah, there is this other argument that was put forth, the donut economy. I don't know whether that's that's familiar to some of us here, but indeed, right? You either have that balance point of stop growing, net growth, or totally degrowth. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. It's not going to happen immediately, unfortunately. And if we're going to go more theoretical, I think that's that Kuznets argument. Damage the environment first. Damage it all the way until you start worrying about what is left for more growth in the future. All right, that's me. I don't know if I've upset anyone on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, any questions, maybe or comments from the audience? Please, students or maybe colleagues. People who are doing research on sustainable development. Okay.
May I?
I don't see who it is. Who is it?
May I? This is Dastan.
Dastan. Okay, please. Yes, Dastan.
President, just to follow up, can you share when you talk about your macroeconomics, environmental macroeconomics research, do you focus what is the focus of the size of the economy that you explore in your model? Is it one country, several countries, region, or the whole world? and within that, yeah, then probably yeah, that's
Okay.
at this point. Yeah.
That's all right. Thanks, Dapson, for that. So I looked at the 8 different economies from the OECD categories. The economies are United States, Canada, Germany, France, Japan, Japan, Korea, sorry about that, Australia, and New Zealand. 8 economies.
And those are developed countries, and
yeah,
probably you have one set of the whatever measurables to measure the natural capital, and that measure probably would be for natural capital probably would be different if you would take the less developed countries, and that would
of course.
change the model, yeah, and then of course the policy would have to change depending on the countries. Okay, yeah.
So
thanks. Clear.
Yeah, so no, that's a great point, Dustin, because even though they are developed, but they are also rich in resource and commodities. So like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and you'd be surprised about the United States as well, in fact, Germany as well. So some of this, they have quite a fair bit of resources that they actually extract in terms of to sustain their development. So indeed, I agree that these are developed nations. If we look at developing countries, it will be different. But the underlying of the argument is that I wanted to look at how resources, how commodities, as a proxy to the environment degradation, is going to have an impact on their performances. Well, and then the irony is, if it will have an impact, then are they fit to be called developed economies? Perhaps they should be considered developing, just like how you had highlighted, Dustin, that developing economies will be very different in terms of how the graphs and how the forecast would shape.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We see some also comments in the chat. There are some links to the books provided. Professor Valentine gave the link to the book Inclusive Wealth Report. To the report Inclusive Wealth Report 2018, and our student also recommended the book Small is Beautiful: A Study of Economics as If People Mattered by Schumpeter, right, from the 70s.
I think that's a nice one. Small is beautiful. Sorry, Dina.
No, that's okay. Lisa Lim also provided a comment. I believe that the implementation of environmental taxes and green accounting relies heavily on political will. Question. So we have only a couple of minutes. So Professor Tang, if you could briefly answer this question. How can these economic frameworks be successfully reframed to gain adoption in nations where the top leadership, Trump and the president of Kazakhstan, currently views the climate change agenda as invalid or economically damaging? Your thoughts?
Okay, I'll just try and do this in 30 seconds because we are pushing to that time. I'm not a political scientist, so I wouldn't know too much about that. But if I were to look at where I had done my work before this, so in one of the mainstream media interview that I did was back in 2017, where they were asking, this was right before, just about time when Trump came on for his first presidency, in terms of how the Paris Agreement would be met on that time, 2019. And my key thoughts to that is that these agreements are not mandatory. They are voluntary. So if there's nothing to hold any of the political decision or leaders in terms of, it's going to affect their time in political office, in office, then there's no way that this is going to be effective. So until all of these agreements are adopted and they are signed and they are part of the bloc, economies are not going to believe in this. And I think the US did not sign the agreement at that point in time. I'm not going to comment too much subsequently after, because I'm not in that field. It's not fair for me to comment. But I thought if we're going to look at whether it's going to be valid or invalid, and I think this is my final point, is that the next leader that come on may continue to degrade the environment, but the next leader that comes on may also start to stop this degradation of the environment. So it really depends the next leader in terms of how then the communication and the messaging is conducted. I hope that helps, Lisa.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. The time is up, unfortunately. Professor Seck Tan, thank you so much for intellectually engaging presentation and discussion. We really enjoyed it, and there is a lot to reflect on, and we hope that the environment will become an equal part of the equation in the economy and policy of Kazakhstan in the future. I would like also to thank you everyone who attended this seminar, and particularly to Amina, who helped to organize this seminar. And I would like to invite everyone for our next seminar that will be next Friday. Thank you so much, and enjoy the weekend. Thank you, Professor Tang, for your terrific, interesting talk today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dina. Thank you.
Thank you.